On September 8, 2021, the lives of Colin Turner and Monica Green took a devastating turn. After a series of heated arguments at their home in Gulf Breeze, Florida, and multiple 911 calls, Colin ended up dead, shot in the back, sparking an investigation that would shake the entire family. Want to know why he died? Or who killed Colin? And I'll tell you right now, it wasn't Monica who killed Colin. If you're curious to find out, stick with this shocking story until the very end. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel now, because if you don't subscribe, I won't tell you who the killer is. In the small town of Gulf Breeze, Florida, where palm trees sway gently in the sea breeze and the sun shines golden on the clear water, life seemed to flow smoothly. The tree-lined streets and charming houses gave off an air of tranquility, a perfect spot for those seeking a little peace near the beach. But beneath this calm facade, a sinister mystery was about to surface. It was an ordinary September morning in 2021, and the sea breeze hinted at just another typical day in the coastal town. But for Colin James Turner, a former Marine sergeant, and his wife, Monica Green, a Navy officer, that day would change everything. They were known for always being at family gatherings and for being incredibly dedicated to their children. Everything seemed under control in their lives. But, as always, appearances can be deceiving. Colin, at 34, carried the invisible scars of the wars he had lived through, those scars that no one sees. He had vision problems due to a brain injury, which hindered his independence but never his willpower. Monica, also 34, had her own internal battles, trying to balance the pressures of her Navy job with the challenges of being a mother and wife. As the sun began to set on that fateful day, no one had any idea what was about to happen. Suddenly, a series of 911 calls shattered the neighborhood's peace, revealing that the tension inside the Turner home was escalating. What began as a family argument quickly turned into a nightmare, ending in a crime that would rock the entire community. Have you subscribed to the channel yet? If your answer is yes, write it in the comments. And if your answer is no, what are you waiting for? Click that button now. On September 8, 2021, it all started like any other day in Gulf Breeze, but it ended up becoming unforgettable for all the wrong reasons. At the Turner house, the already high sun seemed unable to alleviate the tension brewing between Colin and Monica. The atmosphere was so heavy you could almost feel the walls absorbing every harsh word they exchanged. Around noon, the first 911 call was made. Monica's voice, strained and filled with tension, accused Colin of assault. However, when the police arrived, they found no signs of violence. Colin, on the other hand, claimed Monica had borderline personality disorder, which only made their arguments more unpredictable. The afternoon wore on, and at 5 p.m., another call came in. This time, it was Colin on the phone, saying Monica had locked him out of the house. He explained that she had broken his laptop and cut off his access to their money, indicating that things were only getting worse. The desperation in his voice was clear, but without concrete evidence, the police couldn't do much more than try to calm the situation. But the third call, at 6:22 p.m., changed everything. Colin, now locked in the garage, called 911 again. As he tried to explain the whole mess to the operator, gunshots pierced the neighborhood silence. The sounds echoed through the line, and the shocked operator heard what seemed to be the tragic end of a downward spiral of violence. When the police returned to the house, they found Colin dead, shot in the back. The gun was hidden almost casually behind a toaster in the kitchen, a strangely calm scene considering what had happened. Monica, seemingly in shock, quickly confessed to her neighbors and the police that she had shot him, initially claiming self-defense. When the gunshots rang out over the 911 line, the Gulf Breeze police knew this wasn't just another domestic squabble. As soon as they arrived, investigators began piecing together this sinister mystery. The tension was almost palpable, and every step was taken carefully, as any detail could be crucial. The Turner home, once a cozy haven, became a meticulously analyzed crime scene. The garage where Colin was found was filled with everyday items, but now each object could be a vital clue. Investigators collected everything that might help them understand Colin's final moments. The silence was broken only by the clicking of cameras and the whispers of forensic experts. The murder weapon, hidden behind the toaster in the kitchen, was a key piece of evidence. Experts meticulously examined it, searching for fingerprints and gunpowder residue to confirm who had pulled the trigger. Colin's autopsy revealed that the shots were fired at close range, with wounds to his back, suggesting he never saw it coming. This shocked the investigative team, increasing the urgency to solve the case. While forensics did their work, detectives began questioning Monica. Her initial confession, claiming self-defense, only raised more questions. In the interrogation room, Monica was a mix of shock and resignation. She recounted the day's arguments, but her story had several gaps. She said she feared for her life, but the physical evidence didn't match her self-defense narrative. The detectives, skilled at reading between the lines, sensed there was more to the story than she was willing to tell. Investigators also delved into the couple's past, trying to understand what led to this tragic outcome. They discovered that Colin had tried to speak with Monica's superiors in the Navy, reporting emotional abuse, a plea for help that now seemed like a cry ignored. This discovery brought a sense that the tragedy might have been preventable. Furthermore, Monica's mental health became a focal point of the investigation. Medical records showed a history of borderline personality disorder and a suicide attempt. This complicated past added another layer of complexity to the case, raising questions about how untreated mental health can affect tense situations. Investigators knew they needed to handle the case with sensitivity but also firmly, to ensure justice was served. With each new interview and piece of evidence, the case against Monica grew stronger. Neighbors who heard the gunshots and witnessed her confession were also interviewed, their accounts helping to piece together the puzzle of that night. Each testimony was a piece, revealing a more complete but also darker picture of the tragedy that had taken place. The investigation became a race against time, with mounting pressure. Investigators knew they needed to be thorough but also swift, to ensure all evidence was properly collected and analyzed. The Gulf Breeze community watched with apprehension, waiting for answers and justice. The tragedy left a deep mark on the entire community. Colin and Monica's story served as a reminder that behind closed doors, silent and invisible struggles can exist. The investigation not only revealed the truth of that night, but also highlighted the importance of looking beyond appearances and creating communities that encourage openness and support. In the small town of Gulf Breeze, once a quiet seaside haven, whispers and suspicious glances now filled the air. The Turner Green case had become a tangled mess of secrets and lies, each revelation more shocking than the last. Detective Sarah Blackwood, a middle-aged woman with eyes that seemed to see beyond the surface and prematurely gray hair, sat in her office, surrounded by stacks of files. The dim light of the desk lamp cast strange shadows on the walls, as if the very shadows of Colin and Monica's past were coming to life. "There's more to this than we're seeing," she murmured, running her fingers over an old photo of the couple, taken years before the tragedy. The smiles on Colin and Monica's faces seemed genuine, but their eyes told a different story. Colin Turner's file was a mountain of paperwork, each page telling a story of heroism and then decline. Sarah picked up a medical report, her eyes narrowing as she read about Colin's traumatic brain injury. Patient exhibits symptoms of depression, anxiety, and sudden mood swings, she read aloud, the words echoing in the silent room. A CD tucked into the file caught her attention. With trembling hands, she put it into the computer. Colin's hoarse, tormented voice filled the room. I don't know who I am anymore," the recording crackled. "Sometimes, it feels like I'm trapped in a nightmare, unable to wake up. Monica!" She tries to help, but the recording ended abruptly, leaving a deafening silence. Sarah turned her attention to Monica Green's file. At first glance, it was the portrait of an exemplary naval officer. Decorations, promotions, commendations from superiors. But as Sarah flipped through the pages, a darker picture began to emerge. A confidential psychiatric report jumped out at her. Patient displays symptoms consistent with borderline personality disorder. Intensive therapy and possible temporary leave from active duty are recommended. Sarah frowned. The report was from 6 months before the fatal incident. Why was this ignored? She wondered aloud. A sealed envelope at the bottom of the folder caught her eye. Carefully, she opened it, revealing a series of handwritten letters. The handwriting was uneven, the words sometimes blurred by tears. "Dear Sophia," one of the letters began, addressed to Monica's daughter from a previous relationship. "Mommy is trying to be strong, but sometimes it's so hard. Colin doesn't understand. No one understands. Sometimes, I feel like I'm drowning, and no one can see me." Sarah felt a lump in her throat. The letters painted a portrait of a woman on the brink, desperately struggling to maintain control. A police report, filed 3 weeks before the tragedy, made Sarah freeze. It was a domestic disturbance call at the Turner Green residence. The report was brief, almost indifferent. Couple arguing. Situation resolved on scene. No further action required. Sarah slammed her fist on the table, frustrated. How could we have missed so many signs? She wondered, guilt weighing heavily on her chest. A flash drive, hidden in a secret compartment of Colin's file, caught her attention. Heart pounding, she plugged it into the computer. A series of videos appeared on the screen. They were home recordings, capturing moments of the Turner Green family life. At first glance, they seemed like ordinary scenes of a happy family. But as Sarah watched, she noticed the subtle signs. The tremor in Colin's hands, the distant look in Monica's eyes, the whispered arguments when they thought the children weren't listening. The last video, dated 2 days before the incident, made Sarah catch her breath. Colin was alone on screen, his eyes red and swollen. "If anything happens to me," he said, his voice choked with emotion, "I want everyone to know that I loved Monica. I loved our kids. But something is wrong. Something I can't fix. I've tried. God knows I've tried." The recording ended abruptly, leaving Sarah in stunned silence. As the night wore on, Sarah Blackwood remained in the office, surrounded by the ghosts of Colin and Monica. Each document, each recording, each photo told a part of a tragic story of love, pain, and despair. The truth, she realized now, was more complex and painful than anyone could have imagined. Colin and Monica weren't just victim and perpetrator, but two tormented souls trapped in a downward spiral of trauma and untreated mental illness. As the sun rose over Gulf Breeze, bathing the town in a golden light that seemed to mock the darkness Sarah had uncovered, she made a silent promise. The truth would come out, no matter how painful. It was the least she could do for Colin, for Monica, and for the children left behind. What do you think of this story so far? Is the tension between Colin and Monica, the emotional twists and turns, and the unresolved mysteries keeping you hooked? We want to know what you think. Do you think the tragedy could have been prevented? What are your theories about what really happened that fateful night? Do you think the investigation was fair? Share your thoughts and theories in the comments. With a heavy sigh, Sarah began to write her report. The first words blinked on the computer screen. The Turner Green case is not just a single day's tragedy, but the culmination of years of systemic failures, missed opportunities, and unanswered cries for help. And so, as Gulf Breeze awoke to another seemingly ordinary day, the buried secrets of Colin and Monica began their journey toward the light, ready to shake the foundations of the small coastal town and force an entire community to confront the shadows it had ignored for so long. The Santa Rosa County Courthouse, that imposing building with an old movie feel, stood prominently in the center of Gulf Breeze, a monument to justice. On that tense morning, the air was so thick with anticipation you could almost taste it. The heavy courthouse doors creaked open, as if the building itself knew something important was about to unfold. The murmur of the crowd outside paused, replaced by a hush of expectation. Monica Green entered the courtroom, escorted by 2 officers. Her military uniform, once a source of pride, now seemed a distant memory of another life. Her eyes, once vibrant and determined, were dull, like the clouded windows of a tormented soul. Seated at the defense table, Monica seemed smaller than she was. The shoulders that had once borne insignia with pride were now slumped under the weight of guilt and regret. Judge Arthur Blackwood, known for his fairness, entered the room. His gavel struck 3 times, the sound echoing through the courtroom like a warning of the fate about to be sealed. All rise. The Santa Rosa County Court is now in session, the Honorable Judge Arthur Blackwood presiding, the bailiff announced, his voice resonating off the wooden walls. Lead prosecutor Veronica Steele, a middle-aged woman with steely eyes and impeccably styled gray hair, rose. Her dark red suit appeared almost black under the lights, a choice not lost on the more observant attendees. "Your Honor, members of the jury," she began, her voice cutting through the silence like a knife. "What we have here is not just a case of murder. It's a story of betrayal, not just of a spouse, but of an entire code of honor." The next few hours were a roller coaster of evidence. Crime scene photos, so vivid they made jurors avert their gaze. The autopsy report, detailing every wound on Colin Turner, each word falling like a hammer blow on the hearts in the room. But it was the 911 call recording that silenced the courtroom completely. Colin's voice, desperate and gasping, echoed through the room. Please! Help! She has a gun. The sound of gunshots. A muffled scream. Then, silence. Silent tears rolled down the cheeks of some jurors. At the defendant's table, Monica Green remained impassive, her eyes fixed on some distant point, as if she could see beyond the courtroom walls, beyond time itself, to that crucial moment. Defense attorney Marcus Holloway, a young man with tired eyes and a slightly askew tie, rose. His task was near impossible, to show the human side of a woman the prosecution had painted as a cold-blooded monster. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice slightly trembling, "before we condemn Monica Green, we must ask ourselves, what drives a decorated woman, who served our country, to such a desperate act?" Holloway described a woman broken by years of military service, battling unseen demons. He spoke of sleepless nights, nightmares bleeding into reality, a marriage turned war zone. "Monica Green is not a monster," he declared, his voice gaining strength. "She is a victim of circumstances that we, in our comfortable lives, can scarcely imagine." Monica's decision not to testify hit the courtroom like a bombshell. Rumors flew. Some thought she was protecting someone. Others believed guilt kept her silent. In the gallery, Sarah Turner, Colin's sister, sobbed quietly. Her red, swollen eyes darted between hateful glares at Monica and silent pleas to the jury. After days of testimony and arguments, the jury retired to deliberate. The hours stretched on like years. The courtroom, once a whirlwind of emotion, was now steeped in oppressive silence. When the jury finally returned, the air seemed to have been sucked out of the room. The jury forewoman, a middle-aged woman with compassionate eyes, stood. "Your Honor, we have reached a verdict." Judge Blackwood nodded gravely. "Proceed." "In the case of the state versus Monica Green, we, the jury, find the defendant." A moment of unbearable suspense. "Guilty of murder in the second degree." The judge's gavel fell, sealing Monica Green's fate. But for the people of Gulf Breeze, it felt more like a beginning, a collective journey of healing, reflection, and perhaps redemption. As Monica was led away, handcuffed and head bowed, a whisper rippled through the crowd. A mixture of relief, sadness, and the lingering question: how had such a close-knit community missed the signs? How had two war heroes ended up in such a profound tragedy? Outside the courthouse, under a gray sky threatening rain, the residents of Gulf Breeze gathered. Not in celebration, nor in protest, but in a silent vigil. For Colin, for Monica, and for all the silent victims still struggling in the shadows. The Green-Turner case had ended in the courts, but its impact on Gulf Breeze was just beginning. The small seaside town, once known for its tranquil beaches and breathtaking sunsets, now carried a new identity, that of a community determined to never again let silence conceal its deepest wounds. And so, as the sun set over the Gulf of Mexico, painting the sky in hues of orange and red, Gulf Breeze faced its future. Wiser, more vigilant, and above all, united in its resolve to turn tragedy into a catalyst for change. As the sun began to set on Gulf Breeze, painting the sky in shades of orange and red, it was as if nature itself was mirroring the heavy drama that had unfolded in this small seaside town. The waves crashed on the beach in a steady rhythm, a stark contrast to the emotional turmoil stirring within the residents. The courthouse, that imposing red brick building in the center of town, stood silent. The words "Monica Green, guilty" still seemed to echo through the empty halls, a phantom sound that refused to fade. At the Turner house, now inhabited only by shadows and memories, the children's toys lay scattered in the yard. A swing creaked softly in the wind, as if still waiting for the laughter of children that would never be heard there again. Emily and Jack Turner, ages 6 and 4, were living with their maternal grandparents. Their eyes, once sparkling with joy, now held a sadness that didn't belong to their young years. Emily, especially, woke up screaming every night, haunted by nightmares she was too young to explain. "Is Daddy coming back?" Jack would ask almost every day, his small voice filled with a heartbreaking hope. Meanwhile, 8-year-old Sophia Green, Monica's daughter from a previous relationship, was in emotional limbo. Now living with her biological father, Mark, she struggled to understand the difference between the loving father she knew and the monster portrayed by the media. Sometimes, she whispered to her therapist during a difficult session, "I wonder if it's my fault. If I had been a better daughter, maybe." Rose's Cafe, once the hub of lively conversations and light gossip, had become the focal point of tense discussions and anxious whispers. Rose, the owner with graying hair and kind eyes, watched with concern as her clientele changed. "It's like a veil has been lifted from our eyes," she remarked one evening, wiping down the counter with extra force. "How many secrets are still hidden behind closed doors in Gulf Breeze?" It was on one of these nights, with rain lashing against the cafe windows, that a group of residents decided to take action. Led by Sarah Johnson, a local nurse who knew Colin Turner from the hospital, they began planning a community support network. "We can't bring Colin back," Sarah said, her voice trembling slightly, "but we can make sure his death wasn't in vain." As the town tried to move forward, dark details from Colin and Monica's past began to surface, revealing a complicated picture of trauma and pain. A former platoon mate of Colin's, who wished to remain anonymous, shared in an exclusive interview, "Colin was never the same after that mission in Afghanistan. He came back. Different. Quieter. Like a part of him stayed behind in the desert." At the same time, leaked medical records from Monica revealed a prolonged struggle with borderline personality disorder, with failed attempts at treatment and inconsistently taken medication. "The system failed them both," declared Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a forensic psychiatrist called in to analyze the case. "We have two deeply wounded individuals, each in their own way, who didn't receive the support they desperately needed." As more details emerged, a troubling question began to form in the minds of Gulf Breeze residents. Could this tragedy have been prevented? On a particularly tense night, during a town council meeting, Amanda Foster, a local teacher, stood up with tears in her eyes. "I saw the bruises on Colin's arm," she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. "But he smiled and said he'd bumped into a door. I should have said something." The silence that followed was deafening, heavy with collective guilt and regret. Slowly, like a flower blooming in concrete, Gulf Breeze began to transform. The old abandoned warehouse on Main Street was converted into a support center for victims of domestic violence and trauma. The walls, once drab gray, were now covered in vibrant murals painted by local students, each image telling a story of hope and renewal. In the schools, a new curriculum was introduced, focusing on emotional intelligence and peaceful conflict resolution. Children learned not only math and science, but also the importance of expressing their feelings and seeking help when needed. If you're hooked on this story full of mysteries and twists, now's the time to show your support. Leave a like. On a starlit night, exactly 1 year after the tragedy, Gulf Breeze residents gathered on the beach for a candlelight vigil. The flames flickered in the sea breeze, each representing a silent promise of vigilance and compassion. Sarah Johnson, now director of the new support center, spoke to the crowd. "What happened to Colin and Monica is a scar we will always carry," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "But scars are also reminders. Reminders that we must look beyond appearances, that we must listen not only with our ears but with our hearts." As the waves gently lapped the shore, Gulf Breeze united in a moment of silence. The air was heavy not only with sadness but also with resolve. The resolve that from the ashes of this tragedy, a stronger, more compassionate community would emerge. And so, under the starlit Florida sky, a small coastal town faced its future, forever changed, but determined to turn its pain into purpose. The legacy of Colin and Monica, though born from tragedy, had become a beacon of hope and change, lighting the way to a future where silence would no longer conceal the shadows of suffering. The small town of Gulf Breeze, once known for its beautiful beaches and welcoming community, now carried a weight unseen but felt by all. The tragedy involving Colin Turner and Monica Green wasn't just a news story or a closed case. It was an open wound, bleeding ceaselessly through the tree-lined streets and well-kept homes. The salty sea air, once a source of peace, now seemed filled with the whispers of that terrible night. Residents who once greeted each other with smiles now exchanged glances laden with secrets, as if everyone knew that behind drawn curtains and locked doors, dark things could happen. While Monica Green languished in prison, serving a life sentence, the echoes of her actions still reverberated through the town. Every creaking door, every shadow at night, seemed to bring back the terror of that night. The Turner and Green families, once pillars of the community, were now living reminders of a tragedy no one could forget. Sarah Turner, Colin's widow, had become almost a mythical figure, her grief palpable even from a distance, her eyes carrying an endless sadness. At a town council meeting, in the old church hall, change began to take shape. The air was heavy, thick with the pent-up tension of months of silence and denial. "We can't keep pretending nothing happened," said Emma Lawson, a local teacher, her voice trembling as she rose to speak. "Every child in my classroom feels the weight of this tragedy. Every adult on the streets seems to be battling invisible ghosts." A murmur went through the room, as if Emma had voiced what everyone was thinking but afraid to admit. As the community began to open up, buried stories started to surface. Amanda Chen, owner of the local grocery store, tearfully recounted how she had seen bruises on Colin's arm weeks earlier but hadn't said anything. "I should have spoken up," she sobbed, her confession echoing through the hall. Maybe if I had said something." The weight of collective guilt hung over the town like a suffocating fog. Slowly, like a flower blooming after a harsh winter, Gulf Breeze began to change. The old abandoned warehouse on Main Street was renovated and turned into a support center for victims of domestic violence. The walls, once drab and lifeless, were now covered in vibrant murals created by local artists, each telling a story of resilience and hope. In the schools, the curriculum was changed to include classes on mental health and the importance of seeking help. The hallways, once filled with laughter and carefree chatter, now held thoughtful discussions about empathy and understanding. While the town tried to heal, the Turner Green case still cast its shadow. Rumors persisted, fueled by undisclosed details and whispered speculations. They said that on the darkest nights, when the wind howled in from the sea, you could hear the distant echo of screams coming from the old Turner house, now abandoned and crumbling. Others swore they'd seen Sarah Turner walking alone on the beach at dawn, talking to her husband's ghost. It was Sarah, surprisingly, who emerged as a beacon of hope. On a starlit night, exactly 1 year after the tragedy, she organized a candlelight vigil in the town square. "We can't change the past," she said, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. "But we can shape the future." Each candle here represents not just a life lost, but a promise that we will no longer be silent, that we will not ignore the signs, that we will be each other's light in the darkness. As the sun rose over Gulf Breeze, bathing the town in golden hues, something had shifted. The weight of the tragedy was still there, a scar that would never fully disappear. But now, mingled with the sea breeze, there was a sense of resolve, of hope. Doors that were once closed now opened. Neighbors who once avoided contact now greeted each other with warm embraces. The town had been forged in the fires of adversity and had emerged stronger, more united. The Turner Green case would forever be a part of Gulf Breeze's history, a somber reminder of the secrets that can lie hidden behind the most perfect facades. But now, it was also a catalyst for change, a silent battle cry that said, "Never again." And so, as the waves continued to crash against the shore, Gulf Breeze faced its future, wiser, more compassionate, and determined to be a beacon of hope in a world often darkened by silence.